I think Charlotte has always been here. It's this is a place where the city has rested for so long it's become normal. Many of us remember, and many of us do not remember, that in the 80s it wasn't always like this. There were individuals that were houseless, or there were individuals that were homeless, but it wasn't until the Reagan administration where the responsibility of housing was shifted from FEMA to HUD. FEMA used to have control over it. And in cities such as Charlotte and Columbia and Atlanta, places like that. But Atlanta specifically, I remember in the 90s there were a lot of brothers and sisters who were without houses, who were essentially homeless, who were on the street. Charlotte arrived here specifically, if I'm being perfectly honest, if I'm being completely honest, and I can give it an analytical angle, but if I'm telling the truth, it's because we don't see the humanity in individuals who don't live the way we want them to live. Houselessness and homelessness, the way it looks, there's three main issues. One is the availability of affordable housing. Two is living wages. Right, like those two things are absolutely imperative if you're going to have a population that is underneath the 30% cost burdened percentage as described by HUD. Charlotte got here because the cost of living is ridiculous. It costs a lot of money to live in a city that doesn't really allow you to earn a living wage. There are individuals who are paying upwards of $3,000 and $4,000 a month for rent. There are some individuals who can barely afford to pay $800. Charlotte has refused, and we're talking time and time and time again, has refused to not just build and sustain affordable housing. It's an issue of accessible housing. Right? There are so many wait lists for the affordable housing properties in the city. Many individuals cannot even utilize their Section 8 vouchers that are guaranteed by the United States government. So we're looking at not just an analytical answer, to the question. Charlotte doesn't want to do what it's supposed to do. If we're looking at Tent City right now, do you think it's just an issue of rats? Do you think it's just an issue of mice, or there's a rodent infestation? Do you think those rats just materialize, those mice just materialize, those rodents just came out of nowhere? It's been that way for a very long time. However, that is very, very, very expensive land. That is very prime land. And the developers are up against a deadline. They can't continuously to allow themselves to lose money. So Charlotte has to do something sooner than later, or the cash cow, is going to cause a problem, and it's going to create a problem. It's going to be a chain of events that's going to continuously be at the top of the forefront of the news cycle. 59% of Americans in the United States of America are only one paycheck away from homelessness. That's over half. So the average person, the average citizen, is the individual that is right in the line of sight. So empathy allows that, and realizing that you aren't as well off as you think you are. We're in a situation now where capitalism, crony capitalism specifically, is the word of the day. And when I was documenting, issues of social justice, it's been a decade now. It wasn't just BLM, it wasn't just Black Lives Matter, it wasn't just, anti-police brutality protests. It was the Fight for 15. It was the Women's March. It was Standing Rock. It was, the water crisis in Flint. We have to realize that all of these issues affect us all, whether or not you are directly impacted or not. A better quality of life for your fellow citizen means a better quality of life for you. If we're looking at a chain, right? If we're using the analogy of a metal chain, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and a community is only as strong as its people. So, regardless of where you live in Charlotte, it's not that large of a city. Everything is pretty much within walking distance given time. There aren't necessarily any geographical barriers, preventing an individual from gaining access, to where you live and where you work. So why wouldn't we want a higher quality of life and a higher standard of living for everyone in our community? Now, I believe it was 1987. Everything started to change. 87, 88. Everything started to change as far as how housing was looked upon, right? Like in many other nations, housing is a right. Affordable housing is a right. Like they make sure that individuals have someplace to live. In Charlotte, with capitalism, right, there are so many individuals who gain income from rentals, right? There are many corporate individuals who own property, and there are companies who have rentals. So a lot of our lawmakers, right, are landlords. So when you're dealing with something that earns money, first monthly, right, and then the amount of money gained from equity when a property is sold. I mean, that's how a lot of individuals are gaining generational wealth. And people should care, right? Like, even though you have a home, right? You have a house, you have a mortgage, or even a rent system that you can pay perfectly. It's not a problem. The ability to have a safe environment, right? If people don't have, they're going to have to do what they have to do to obtain. So if we're talking about crime and people feeling safe in their homes, we're going to have to find a way. No, no. It makes more sense that the United States has a business model, right? If we're talking about a business approach, to housing, there are so many other communities and so many other countries in the world that don't have such a large houseless and homeless population. In Los Angeles alone, right? Skid Row has the largest homeless population in the country. Like, there are more homeless people there than anywhere else in the United States of America. And people should care because they're human beings. They're people, right? Like when it shifted, when the Reagan administration shifted housing, right, from FEMA to HUD, it removed the responsibility, from the government, kind of, sort of. So as recently as a few months ago, Ben Carson kind of like backed up and held up the idea that homelessness isn't a government issue, it's a state issue, or it's a city issue, it's local, which again absolves the United States of all of these issues that they've allowed to progress systemically. Like, there's almost no way out of poverty. Remember when Charlotte was 50 out of 50? That's still a very real occurrence, and that's still a very real fact. It's difficult to get out of poverty once you're in poverty, and a lot of individuals in Charlotte are in poverty. Again, 59% of all Americans are one paycheck away. Not one mistake away, not one accident away, one paycheck away from homelessness. Can we talk about what is first, right? Or what is before the 90 days? What is before housing individuals in a temporary situation? It's less expensive to house folks permanently. It costs less money to allow individuals into permanent housing. Hotels are are a temporary solution, and it gets people essentially off the street. But it would cost less money to allow individuals to establish themselves in permanent housing. There's a specific number, actually. Hold on a second. I'm going to give you this number. I wanted to make sure I used it correctly. There's a specific number that I want to bring into the conversation. It's right here. The average rent in Charlotte is $1,284, right? That's approximately $15,408 per year. 4 million divided by 15,408 is 259. We could house in Charlotte 259 families. We could house 259 families. There aren't 259 families in Tent City as we know it today. We can house 259 families just by keeping the CMPD budget the same as it was last year, without cutting a single dollar from the budget. Just keeping it the same way it was last year, we would be able to house 259 families in Charlotte, North Carolina. As of last March, last year, the population of individuals experiencing homelessness in Mecklenburg County was 3,683. We can do this. The money is already available. By placing individuals temporarily in in hotels, yes, that is one way. It essentially removes them from the street, but it doesn't change their situation, right? Like, see, being outside isn't as big as an issue as a breakdown in structure. See, if you don't have an address, it's very difficult to obtain employment. You know, if you don't have a driver's license or you don't have an ID, you know, with an address that they're going to send you in the mail, right? Like, this isn't like some other cities and states to where you go and you get a license and an ID, they give it to you in your hand. IDs are mailed in North Carolina. So the money is available. You know, you'll hear it often. Where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming from? And it isn't a defund the CMPD. It isn't that. Like, that's not so much the message as the money is already available. The money is here. I just broke down just keeping the budget the same as it was last year, right? But I have 259 people. That's just not raising the CMPD budget. There's money all around the city. But it isn't an issue of safety. It isn't an issue of health. It's an issue of money. Developers and individuals want to make sure that they can make money, and they should be able to make money, right? Business and commerce and capitalism, that's America. But it's at the expense of lives. It's at the expense of quality of lives. Those rats, those mice, those rodents have been around for a very long time. They've been burrowed into the ground for a long time. That video was from January, I believe. And many members, you know, in leadership were saying that they had no idea. But smaller grassroots organizations and, you know, nonprofits were making it known that there was a rodent infestation months ago. So either someone's lying or there's a complete lack of accountability. But there are solutions. There are ways that we can find ways, you know, to be humane in spite of everything that's going on. It's unacceptable for a country this wealthy. It's unacceptable for a city with access to this many resources. I mean, this is one of the banking capital of the United States. We're acting like we can't find the money. But we can't find the money for things and causes and people we don't respect. If it's someone we're trying to woo, or if there's something that we can gain directly, we're going to find a way. That's just the American way. And Charlotte is going out of its way to not do what it can do with the snap of a finger. You know, with privatized prisons and incarceration being traded, you know, on NASDAQ, you have to understand that an individual is worth more in a cage than they are working a regular job. See, I believe in North Carolina, a body in a jail cell is worth $40-something thousand. I can't remember the exact number. What do you think the amount of taxes you pay in a year? So when an individual is worth more incarcerated, wouldn't it make sense to incarcerate more people? And in America, you get the justice that you can afford. So homelessness, right, or houselessness is a hot button now. Do you realize all North Carolina has to do, or all, you know, is a state of emergency, right? Like, that's what's happening, and every time that happens, government money, right, goes to the coffers. So you create a problem, right, and then you get paid to fix the problem. You create a problem, and then you get paid to fix the problem. So that's why you're seeing so many different individuals who have never been on the ground. They have never done the work, who are now claiming to be an outlet for Tent City. Because it's money. There's money available. But also, you would do more for your family members. You would do more for your friend that you care about. You know, you would do more for, you know, your homeboy who's experiencing a hardship than you would Mr. Charlie, who said he used to be an accountant, but he lost his job, or his wife died, or, you know, something just happened and he just experienced a rapid decline. We don't have a face of homelessness. You know, we don't have a person we can look at like, wow, this is a man or a woman or a person that we respected who just for whatever reason, and, you know, regardless of how much responsibility they take for their own action, the end result is the same. And that's what's really interesting about shifting the blame and the responsibility from government to people. It's like, what did you do wrong? You're homeless, so you must have did something wrong. You know, I mean, there's no way that your job didn't pay you on time. There's no way that your job isn't paying you enough. There's no way that you have a cruel landlord. That's not possible. There's no way that you know, you were driving, you know, and something happened and your car was impounded and now you can't get to work and you lost your job and now you don't have, like, there's no way that happened. There's no way that you can have an answer that is acceptable to me to make me believe that you don't deserve to be homeless. Because it's easy to look at someone who has been outside for a day or two or a week or a month or 6 months or a year, and the story starts to change. I remember a story. I was in Atlanta. It's the first city I lived in outside of my hometown, and I was 19 maybe. And my mom had sent me down to live, with my dad, and that didn't work out. And he was sending me back, to Illinois, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to be in Illinois, just let me out. So cool, I lived in Atlanta by myself. I remember I called home, and my brother was like, look, bro, and this is my little brother. He said, look, bro, I'm going to tell you. This is profound wisdom. He said, I'm going to need you to get it together before your story changes. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, if you don't get it together right now, and, you start to look a little different, your haircut isn't as fresh, that line, isn't as sharp, and, your shoes aren't as clean, your story's going to change, and people are going to look at you differently. So I need you to do everything you're going to do right now while you still have the benefit of the doubt, and that stuck with me. See, houseless folks, it isn't their story, it's their appearance, right? Like if someone in a tailored suit, has Bentley keys in their hand, like, hey man, I just lost my wallet, man. I just need $1. I ain't said nothing. Here's 20. You don't think anything of it. But we don't respect the individuals who and by respect, this isn't a sweeping generalization, but people who are doing less than, we feel that they deserve the position that they're in. And it's not for us to help them out of that position, right? You're in traffic and someone pulls up, or not pulls up, I'm sorry, they're knocking on your window, or they're asking, for help, they have a sign, you don't care, right? Not because you're mean, not because you're malicious, but you just, it's your story. But if your friend needed $20, it's not a problem. We don't have a face to homelessness. We don't have an individual who we care about unless it's us, right? We don't have a family member unless it's in our family who's experienced these issues. So it removes a humanity from the 59% of individuals who are one paycheck away from homelessness. Charlotte isn't the city you want to be poor in. Charlotte isn't the city you want to lose your job in. This isn't the city you want to be hurt in. And I've experienced every last one of those in succession. A lack of preventative measures, this isn't the city to be poor in. Remember, Charlotte was 50 out of 50 in upward mobility. That's a fact. That's a statistic that you can find. You can pull out your phone right now and you can see Charlotte is 50 out of 50. That doesn't mean 50 out of 50 in people who don't want to work full time. That isn't 50 out of 50 in people who are lazy, right? That isn't that. That is a systemic issue. That is a governmental issue. 50 out of 50. It doesn't say 50 out of 50 in people who are kind of cool. It doesn't say 50 out of 50 in men who are handsome, or 50 out of 50 in women who are pretty. It's not that. It's 50 out of 50 in upward mobility. What does a person working every single day, a person with a regular job, what power do they have to affect upward mobility? That doesn't sound like a governmental issue. It doesn't sound like a larger issue that's being controlled by the powers that be. When you think of politicians, the average politician has wealth. The average politician owns a home. The average politician is in a much better financial position than the average person. So you're getting laws and policies made by folks who are doing better in life than you. That's why it's important to vote not only in your best interest, but to vote for people who care about the interests of the majority of people, because most people are poor. I don't care how many social media posts and how many Clubhouse open forums you're on, and people are telling you how to pivot, and they're talking about their $1 million ideas. Most people in this country are poor. Now you can look at it two ways. You can look at it, well, I'm not poor. I'm not going to be poor. I'm going to get my money. I'm going to hustle. That's fine. You still have members of your family. You still have friends. We're going to fall into that percentage of folks that ain't got it. And with that being said, I think that if we looked at our communities as family, right, instead of just folks we just don't know, I think we would have more empathy. See, the system isn't set up for us to win. The system is set up for it to look good. The system is set up for a couple of billionaires, right, and everyone else is doing without. And I don't think people understand how much $1 billion is, right? Like they don't fathom 999 million plus $1 million. Like they don't, because $1 million is insane, but 999 million plus $1 million. And there's some folks who have a couple of those. There's some folks who have dozens of those. So Charlotte doesn't have to do anything for its houseless population. Because houseless people, for all intents and purposes, homeless people, they aren't voting, right? Historically. They aren't paying a lion's share of the taxes, historically. So if you're not voting, you're not paying taxes, politically speaking, you don't have a voice. So it takes the advocacy of individuals who are just trying to make it, right? Because most people who care about these issues are poor. It's not rich people who care, right? We can eradicate all of this just by properly taxing Jeff Bezos, right? We could eradicate all of this by properly taxing Oprah, right? Like people we respect, people we love, Jay-Z, tax the billionaires. But we're not doing that. So Charlotte is doing what every other city is doing almost. It's kicking the can on down the road. But that can, is going to eventually ricochet and come back and bust you upside the head. Now you're sitting here, with your dome bust, and it's like, well, I don't know what happened. Like, where did that come from? How did we get here? We're where we've always been. So a lack of a political education, dooms us to repeating the same process over and over again. Poor people are at the bottom. Poor people of color are under that, right? And then poor people of color establishing mental health issues are under that. Poor people of color with felonies, right, that are experiencing mental health issues are under that, and it just keeps going. Poor trans people, right, who are poor, who are experiencing mental health issues, like it just keeps going and going and going, and it's almost impossible to in Charlotte to experience upward mobility if you're 50 out of 50. Capitalism. NIMBY is not in my backyard. Where are you going to build these affordable housing developments? See, developers are they're up against a brick wall. Like it's between a rock and a hard place. They want to make money. They make money by building. They make money by getting government contracts and all those other things. People don't want these developments, with affordable housing in their neighborhoods. That's why every single affordable housing complex you see or development you see is in the hood. It's next to people who don't necessarily have a voice anyway. But education is one part, right? But we aren't going to educate ourselves to liberation. We aren't going to good credit our way. We aren't going to thoughts and prayers our way to liberation and to freedom. This is a systemic issue that the United States has always carried. So it isn't the responsibility of the homeless person, right, of the houseless person. It is a system that is preventing. It's easy to think that you can educate your way out of this system, but you're going to probably not just die of starvation prior to earning your PhD. All right, like you have to make it those 8 years. You got to make it those 8 years. You got to take that first step. That first step might be the associate's. That second could be the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD. What are you going to do in the meantime? You don't have an affordable, or you can't afford to live, to earn a living wage. Where are you going to live? We're taking for granted that, like, my mother passed away a few years ago. I don't have a mom anymore. You can always live with your mama, unless you've done just the worst of the worst. I don't have a mom I can live with. And people are going to say, well, you're a grown man. Well, why would you want to live with your mom? Because it's rough out here. It's a lot. When you drive by a neighborhood, and you'll see 5, 6 cars. You think it's 5, 6 people live in that house? You think it's one person with 5 or 6 cars? 5 or 6 people that live in that house, and they're sharing the rent or they're sharing the mortgage. That's what we have to do in today's economy. So I think we're doing a disservice, or we're being disrespectful, however we want to look at it. We're being dismissive to the plight of individuals who have experienced houselessness and homelessness by thinking that it is because they aren't educated enough. It is because they haven't programmed enough. Now, granted, you can do this and your life can change, for better or worse. See, if we're thinking spiritually as well, if there's good, there's evil. If there's bad, there's good. And we need to look at it that way. So it would make sense to educate people, right? But it's difficult to try to educate someone that's experiencing a mental health crisis. Like, if there's something going on up here, the last thing you're trying to do is, earn an associate's, right, in engineering, right? It's just not computing. I don't know if an associate's program in engineering even exists, but we have to deal with folks where they are. And it's dangerous to try to bring people, like for example, 90 days, any hotel in Charlotte under this current system could turn into the Carter, right? Like those of us who remember New Jack City, it's a drug dealer's dream. Not saying the system is a drug dealer's dream, but the Carter was a drug dealer's dream. There were folks who were basically trapped, in this community that Nino Brown controlled. So it isn't just one thing to remove folks from a situation. See, some people in Tent City, and I always do air quotes, some people in Tent City are safer in Tent City than they are in a shelter. Some people in Tent City are safer than they are in a motel. Keep in mind, we're still in the throes of COVID. We're talking about individuals who don't have adequate access to medical care. We're talking about individuals who have already expressed concerns, valid concerns, of being victims of predatory behaviors, being victims of rape, being victims of robbery, assaults. And now there's going to be more people in a confined space. And with more people in a confined space, and people who society already doesn't all the way respect, they're going to be policed. Why do you think CMPD hasn't been deployed into Tent City? Why do you think the Sheriff's Department hasn't been deployed into Tent City? And I mean right now, in this instance, you have to be very careful in what you introduce into an ecosystem. We're gonna bring the police. We're gonna make sure that they're experiencing safe transport to the hotel. Everybody doesn't want to have CMPD around. Everyone doesn't want to have the sheriffs around, and that's their right. Like you're not doing anything. You're not breaking the law. This isn't anything specific, but it's some folks just don't need that. They just want to be left alone. And if you're removing someone from their dwelling, regardless of if you approve of it or not, and I get it, a lot of this is on private land. It's not public land. This isn't land that has been freely given. We're running into we're running into situations that aren't ideal. And if we're running into situations that aren't ideal, folks are going to continue to do what they have to do. Why is it up to you and I? Why is it up to local government to tell people what they need to do when there isn't a viable option? There isn't a viable option that works for what they expect to receive, even if it's nothing at all, right? Some folks are like, look, I'm minding my own business. I'm in this tent. I know it isn't the Taj Mahal, but I'm okay. Leave me alone. But it's private property, and it's private property that's worth a lot of money to developers. So developers are pressuring members of city council. Developers are pressuring local politicians, and they're pressuring law enforcement. Look, hey man, we gotta make this money, and cash rules everything around me. Housing as a right. Affordable housing viewed as a right. It's not in the Constitution. So folks are going to say, well, why is it up to private investors, right, to take care of you? Why do I have to take care of you? Take care of yourself. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. That's not a government's responsibility, but the government takes care of corporations. There's been billions and trillions by now in bailouts to corporations because they're too big to fail. We can't even get a funky ass $1,400 stimulus. That's owed to us. This is taxes that have been already taken out of your paycheck. We can't even get back. So there are individuals who feel you don't deserve anything but death after you're worked to death. And that's why the houseless and the homeless issue is such a big thing, because they're like, they don't work. So they don't work, they don't have any investment, they don't have any equity in our Social Security system, they don't have any investment in our taxation system. They don't get to remove, they don't get to withdraw. If you don't have any money in the bank, you can put your PIN number in all you want in your bank or in an ATM, nothing's coming out. That's what a lot of people feel. You aren't working. You aren't investing into a system that's supposed to take care of you. How dare you? That's communism. It might be socialism, but they'd rather say communism because communism was the worst thing in the world. If you were accused of being a communist back in the day, you lost everything. You might have lost your life. So it works as long as it's a corporation. It's okay to give a handout if it's a corporation. Even one of our favorite quarterbacks received a whole lot of money from the government, bought a yacht, but he's a world champion. I think Jesus said, and I'm going to paraphrase, the poor will always be with you. They're always going to be here. There's always going to be people without. But our mindset is that billionaires are lucky. Billionaires work hard. Billionaires are people we want to be around. They're not exploited. Why would they steal? Why would they kill? Why would they receive profits over people? Why would they continue to receive record profits? There are some individuals, some CEOs who make more money, right, per hour than their lowest paid employee makes per year. I believe Jeff Bezos makes more money per hour, maybe per minute. I can't remember which one it is, than his lowest paid employee makes per year. So I believe there will be a day, but it's going to take a revolution. I believe there will be a day, but it's going to take a bunch of people. Remember when there was an idea a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, there's a bunch of people that decided to storm the Capitol. Worst idea ever, but they were together. Worst idea ever. Worst idea. That's one of the worst ideas I've ever seen in my life, but it was a bunch of people who decided to do something together. And with that, it almost worked, right? I'm saying that not even respecting what happened at the Capitol. That was a crime. Why aren't those folks being prosecuted? I think that we have to do something as people who aren't homeless, right? We have to do something as far as advocate for homelessness while we aren't homeless. If you're homeless, it's difficult to advocate for yourself. Like you're already the person they don't want to talk to. So again, part of what we're dealing with is that we can't put a face to someone, to a thing that we respect. So it's just a bunch of dirty people, right? It's just a bunch of uneducated people, just a bunch of unlucky people that we don't know anyway that are experiencing a hardship. Well, maybe they should have done something better with their life. But I think we will experience a better way of life for more people, but it's not going to be gained through political means. It's going to be gained through the power of the people. It's going to take folks who care more about other folks than they care about themselves. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So when we vote, they're going to gerrymander. Mm-hmm. You know, it's for every action there's a reaction, and every reaction there's an action. They're ready for whatever it is we want to do. I think we need to remove ourselves from the system. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was the longest financially devastating, long-standing boycott of black folks in history. You know, we didn't get on that bus for nothing. Some people in revisionist history and folks who just don't read, I think it maybe lasted a couple of weeks, a few months. It lasted well over a year. If we remove our physical bodies, right? If we remove our money, we're going to get what we want. But we don't think enough to do that. Remember, like, we're going to boycott Gucci. Some people are like, man, I just bought a sweater. I don't know what you're talking about. I just bought a belt. Like, I'm going to tuck my t-shirt in. It doesn't look good with the outfit, but I'm tucking it in. You know, that's what I'm going to do. It's Gucci, nigga. It's Gucci. Not even Radrick Davis Gucci, nigga. It's like Gucci. Like, this is what we're doing. But revolution looks like whatever it needs to look like, right? It can be academic, it can be physical. Like, you can literally get in the streets. It can be financial. Like, you know, you can withhold your dollars from the system. You cannot support companies and corporations and politicians who are white supremacists, right? You don't have to spend money with people who hate you. You don't have to do that, regardless of how it makes you feel, and you know, of how popular or unpopular it is. The power is within the people, and Fred Hampton said that, right? Well, like, we're going to defeat this. Like, we're going to run up, right? Like, a lot of people think you need to run up on the government physically. You're not going to win the battle of running up on the government, but you can starve the government. You can make the government bow. You know, people do it all the time, right? There are lobbyists. There are organizations in this country that make the government do what they want them to do every single day. But it's difficult for us because we never had anything. And once we get something, you know, we remove that knowledge, you know, from our communities. So I think a revolution looks like whatever it needs to look like. I think it looks like hitting every single element of political education and doing what we need to do. For example, back in the day, folks would go to jail often. They would keep going to jail, and it would overload the system, right? That was an effective means of protest. You can keep going to jail if you want to. They got satellites all over the city. They got satellite jails all over the state, right? They will have you, as long as you're in North Carolina, right, they can move you wherever they need to move you. So that's not as effective anymore. You know, just going to jail. You know, I'm going to jail. They would do that at sit-ins and things like that because once, you know, the local jail got filled, that was it, right? Like you got what you needed. It's not the case anymore. So we have to upgrade. We have to update our tactics, right? A political education is absolutely important. Fred Hampton spoke to that at length. Political education, or you end up replicating the tools of white supremacy. You end up replicating the tools of oppression. So the more we read, all I do is read. You know, I'm moving, so I don't have all of my books here or in my bookcases, but all I do is read. A political education means more to the movement, you know, than followers on social media, because you end up doing the right thing. You know, like the movie, you end up doing the right thing if you know why you're doing it and if you know where you came from. So I think that a revolution is important. I think that it's absolutely imperative. I think it's something that needs to happen within our lifetime because it's a cycle. You know, you're not going to get respect begging. You're not going to get what you need praying. You're not going to get what you need by sitting idly by waiting on the sweet by and by. You have to do something about it, and it's going to be earned oftentimes if we're talking of historical merit through violence. But poverty is violence. Poverty is violence, and it's being used against us